Welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. My name is Scott Barker, Head of Partnerships and Revenue at Sales Hacker. I'll be moderating this discussion today, and it's a special day, not only because I have two amazing guests with me, but it's actually my birthday today. So happy birthday to me. But anyway, super excited for this conversation. What are we talking about? We're talking about the future of scaling sales teams and what we should do right now to set ourselves up for success into the future. So joined with me is Lars Nilsson and Kris Rudeegraap. Am I pronouncing that right? Graap?
Yes,
These are one of those questions I should have asked before we go live, but you know, it is what it is. Gentlemen, welcome to the Sales Hacker community.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, excited to pick your brains. Definitely two legends in the tech world. And I always like to add a little bit more color to the community in case they haven't been following your careers. So Lars is the CEO of SalesSource, which is a premier business services consulting firm specializing in industry-leading best practices and advisory for the optimization of sales ops and also inside sales teams. He has 25 years as a global leader in enterprise software and selling solutions. And prior to SalesSource, Lars was the VP of Global Inside Sales for Cloudera, just a small company. And you've also served in sales exec roles at ArcSight, which is also HP, Riverbed Technology, Portal Software, all three of which achieved IPOs, in addition to Cloudera. And mentoring sales teams now is really your greatest passion, as you were saying earlier. So it's a dream career for me as a young guy. I look at that, and that's I think that's what we're all striving for. So excited to get into it, and excited to have you on today. All right, and going over to Kris. So Kris is the co-founder and CEO of Sendoso. For those of you who don't know, it's the world's first sending platform. And Kris has more than a decade of sales experience and has spent time at TalkDesk, Yapstone, and Picora. And during that time, basically discovered that creating meaningful engagements through direct mail and gifting was an extremely effective way to drive demand and increase his sales, which helped kind of inspire this idea, which turned into Sendoso. And Kris is a California native, CSU Chico alum, shout out, and currently residing in San Francisco. So welcome.
Thanks for the intro. Yeah.
No worries. Okay, so let's dive right into it. So I think what we want to talk about today, and I think every sales leader kind of knows the struggle of scaling, right? Sourcing talented hires, quickly ramping them up, coaching them as they grow, retaining them, which is getting harder and harder in this super competitive market, and then offering some sort of upward trajectory in their careers so that they actually stick around and you get your, positive ROI from hiring them. And not to mention, all of this is taking place in this world now that we live in that is changing faster than ever before. From a process standpoint, from a technology standpoint, it seems like every few months the whole game changes. So, Lars, I want to start with you. And you've served in numerous sales exec roles at 4 different companies that all achieved their IPOs. Any specific insight on the sales teams there? Is there anything that stood out? Any key characteristics that these kind of pre-IPO teams had that achieved this IPO?
Yeah, great question. And as I look back on the last 20 years and being involved in these 4 companies, the one thing that sticks out to me is just the importance of building pipeline. What I did in all 4 companies was pretty much the same thing, and that was build out the pipeline generating aspect of it. And what it was the sales development role and function. All 4 companies were enterprise class software companies The first two were on-premise, the last two were SaaS, but they were longer sales cycle, 6 to 9 to 12 months, and the average selling price was 50 to 100K. In that model, it turns out that prospecting through a non-quota carrying role of an SDR, whose sole function it is to find a deal to work on, was the differentiator in all four companies achieving the kind of scale, right? Let sales reps sell, negotiate, and close. Let SDRs beat the bushes. In that model, we were able to fill the pipeline of 3 reps with 1 SDR. And counterintuitive to a lot of execs and maybe founders that why would we dedicate a non-quota carrying role to someone that's managing inbound leads and maybe doing outbound cold calls? Well, it turns out that pipeline, which is the air that we all breathe, has to continually be generated, and it's done in a much more efficient way through the sales development role. So in all 4 companies, I would say that the SDR role and function was a differentiator for the enterprise class solutions that we were hawking.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so we just got a great chat, and thank you, Jeff, for the chat. Please don't assume everyone understands the acronyms that we're using. And I know we all come from the SaaS world, and it's kind of second nature. SDR meaning a sales development rep. So someone whose sole job is to go out and create opportunities or pipeline for a actual quota carrying account executive. And SaaS being software as a service. Is there any other acronyms in there that we missed?
Some companies call them BDRs. So
BDRs?
I'm also seeing
XDR now?
ADRs.
Yeah.
I've seen, actually, on that topic, one of the unique things that we've done on the kind of a tangent, but on how we've titled it, SDR.
Let's do it.
Actually recently changed their names to sending specialists and tiered versions of that. And actually the reason was because our new office in Arizona, or not new anymore, but that we scaled up to about 20 SDRs or sending specialists now, they were getting recruited right and left. And we saw like a 90% decrease in their recruiting, changing their titles.
Smart, because then people can't go on LinkedIn, the recruiters, and just type in BDR. No one's looking for a sending specialist.
No, exactly. So it throws them off. So, don't.
That's smart. Yeah. BD managers out there, switch the name, retain the employees. That's genius. I like it. Okay, Lars, going back to kind of your methodology here. So you were kind of at this forefront when people were splitting up the sales role, splitting up the cycle into kind of 2 different functions. And depending on what industry you're in SaaS, for example, now it's very popular. A lot of people are adopting that model, but it's almost swung too far the other way. And everyone's like, hey, if we're selling, magazine subscriptions, we need an SDR and we need an account executive, because that's what all the big SaaS companies are doing. In your mind, what's the math when it makes sense from like a average deal size to actually split that role?
Right, and this is a hotly, not contested, but a hotly debated topic on the Modern Sales Pros, which is an online community of operators. And I said earlier that in all 4 companies that I was a part of, it was more of an enterprise class sale, larger ticket item, longer sales cycle. $50,000 revenue bar for an initial deal size in 6 to 9 to 12 months. I think that's gone down to a lot of people talking about $20,000. If you're $15,000 to $20,000 or more in ARR, I would say maybe 25. And you're at 3 to 6 months sales cycle, I do think it makes sense to bifurcate the prospecting and selling into 2 roles.
Yep.
More and more, though, SaaS has allowed us to sell our wares faster and cheaper. And so as you get below the 20,000 ARR mark, and you can do it inside of 3 months. There's a lot of, lead to demo to close. I think you have to be able to do that in an all-encompassing ISR or inside sales rep role.
Right.
I'm seeing that more and more. So there's not the heavy lift account executive that you pay 400,000 OTE for, but you have a very highly tuned marketing demand gen engine bringing you inbound leads, and you've spent time understanding what your total addressable market and ideal customer profile is. And so you can manage an outbound, cadence with your target accounts, and automate a lot of that outreach, and have pre-qualified people raising their hands that can go right to a quota-carrying ISR. And so, some people might say it's lower than 20,000. Some people might say it's above 20,000, but that's kind of where I've settled on.
Yeah. I would chime in and say there's a couple other factors that we looked at too to get it even better. Someone's asking what's an ISR. Another acronym.
Yeah, no, sorry. ISR stands for Inside Sales Rep. And what I mean by that is it's a quota-carrying sales rep, but they're located at a headquarter location with a bunch of team members in a bullpen, all getting after it.
Versus, just for that use case, versus the field rep who might be enterprise, knocking on doors or going in person meetings is the difference.
Yeah. I'm gonna try and get a buzzer. So anytime we use an acronym, I'll just.
To that point, though, I think we've looked at it, kind of the initial ARR even lower, even closer to 10K, and a couple factors that we've seen is one, looking at like the lifetime value and kind of the land and expand opportunity. So even if the deal gets in the door lower, you still can see that there's a big upsell in the land and expand. So it makes it worthwhile to invest in that, SDR role. The other factor that we've looked at too is the location and salary of where these folks sit. So if you're building this team in San Francisco versus maybe a secondary market like, Phoenix or Austin or, Carolinas or Utah, you might be able to get a better bang for your buck. And so you can, the math might differ slightly than if you're doing New York, San Francisco, Chicago, those markets.
Yeah, those are all really great points. Great points. And then, so the other thing that I often think about and often hear about, so you're adding this layer of complexity when you're breaking up the role, right? You're adding more opportunities for misalignment. There's a handoff process that has to happen. Kris, how do you keep the SDR, the sales development rep, and the AE, the account executive, super tight the whole way through?
Yeah, so it's a good question. One of the things that we do through the kind of the process is we like to have the SDR do like an intro into the AE for that first meeting for the demo. Yep.
Yeah. So they're on the demo for the whole demo, or just like the first little bit, or?
In some cases, for some of the reps, we will say that they can sit in on the background, mute, and then still do some maybe behind the scenes work. So they can sit in, but with and that maybe for training purposes, although we've since shifted using like Gong, we've been able to, say, hey, you don't need to sit on the call. You can go back and listen to these calls later, which has been helpful. But there's some good synergies so that they know that, hey, I just set this meeting with this ICP. How did that demo turn out? So that they're continuing to define their pitch when they're doing their cold calls or cold emails based on, how that demo and the discovery call and some of that information happened.
I'd pile on and say that there's a guy by the name of Tito Bort that has written about the dead zone, the opportunity handoff dead zone, and has created a really nice graphic around it. And you're right. Without process and technology, I think that the fumbling or the an opportunity is kind of getting lost in the shuffle is high. I think it's an opportunity for marketing, sales operations, and sales to come together and work together to define the kind of inbound speed to lead to opportunity process. Those three stakeholders into a room and everyone understands what each person's part in the process is, and you document it, and you have that as a part of the onboarding process so everyone understands their role, because there are a lot of moving parts when you bring in an SDR, AE, but you have leads coming in, or you're, you might have a marketing automation system that is also blasting out messages to your lead database. Orchestration of everyone's parts and roles becomes increasingly important. And so the importance of a really good kind of revenue operator, which is a combined marketing and sales operator, is, I think, crucial to insert into your company early on to make sure that you don't have those, disconnects.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And revenue operations in itself could probably be a whole other webinar. So I don't want to go too far down that, although I love talking about it. And I think it's something that needs to be discussed more and more. Shout out Tito Bohort. He's awesome. He's a contributive sales hacker all the time. And I think you can actually find the chart that you're talking about on Sales Hacker. So I guess my question then is, if you don't have a good revenue ops leader, is there other ways you can maybe incentivize the BDR to stay in the deal longer? Like, what are your viewpoints on giving them a percentage of revenue closed as a BDR, SDR? Thoughts on that?
I'll take that one because I'm pretty outspoken and I'm pretty on the topic.
Yeah.
So BDR, ADR, LDR, SDR, I think that you should only pay them for what they can control.
Right.
And typically, the operations that I've built, the SDR controls the getting of the appointment and handing it off to a sales rep.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not that conversation ends up becoming an opportunity that goes into the active pipeline and forecast,
mm-hmm.
It's not so much in the control of an SDR.
Right.
Once they do their job and get someone, the right persona at a target company to say yes to a 15 to 20 minute call with the subject matter expert, also known as the account executive, their
mm-hmm.
job is to pay them. If for some reason that deal ends up closing 3, 6, 9, 12 months down the road, I know a lot of people will give a spiff to the BDR, but I don't know that there's much control over what they have. So right. I am a fan of creating all these ways of trying to pay more for a BDR if something goes further. Now,
mm-hmm.
in much more mature companies that have many levels of sales, both on the quota carrying side and on the prospecting side,
mm-hmm.
there are scenarios where you can create, let's say, a pod model where a BDR or an SDR is attached one-to-one with a quota-carrying account executive. And in those kind of models, sometimes it does make sense to combine a territory or a revenue goal and pay them both on it.
Yeah.
One of the things we do, so I would say 100% I agree with that. One of the things we do is we have like a few different tiers of SDRs. So there's kind of like SDR 1, 2, and 3 based on kind of your seniority. And
mm-hmm.
so, and then, from the SDR 3, there's like 3 or 4 career tracks thereafter, either going into the AE role or a couple others. But the AEs are taught to, if an SDR 3, which is more senior one, sets the meeting, to give them a bit more coaching or talk through the meeting or kind of provide a bit more mentorship to them, because they're at this more senior level to then get into an AE role thereafter, and spend a little time with maybe the more very junior ones that just started, because they're just getting going and they're being coached in some other ways. So that's another way that we have kind of created some process to help the SDR stick through the sales cycle more.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I'm definitely on board with what you're both saying. I think the flip side, the other argument, just to play devil's advocate a little bit, is kind of this pod thing, right? If you are tied to that end goal, that metric, then I've seen, when I was leading a team of BDRs, we played around with that a little bit, and we found that our BD team was actually tracking the deals right into the end. And so let's say like a follow-up was missed or something, our BDR would like shoot the AE a note and be like, hey, like we got to get this to them right away. And, we thought initially maybe the AEs would like hate it, but they actually loved it because it was almost like having, a wingman or a wingwoman watching your back as you were out there. So, but yeah, it is difficult. It can also be demoralizing. Like you said, if you don't have any control and your monetary benefit is tied to it, it can be demoralizing for the team. All right, let's go. We've got some great questions actually coming in. So let's quickly go to the community. So Ted has a question: how is the BDR paid? So we basically just touched on that. But Kris, you want to just break down typically like the split between, op commission and salary typically?
Yeah, so our SDRs are paid based on the level of their seniority. So there's 3 different seniorities. Based on that, there's a breakdown of salary plus their variable comp based on the number of meetings they set. And then there's some accelerators if they hit their meeting goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty standard. The split is typically 70% salary, 30% variable. Sometimes it's 60-40.
Yeah.
Typically a meeting goal target per month. And I've seen, depending on the complexity of the solution and the target persona, targets as low as 6 to 8 meetings a month, and as high as 20 to 25 meetings a month. And again, there's a lot of variability in, are these hybrid reps, BDRs? Do they do both inbound and outbound? Or has the company matured and they've specialized and now they have inbound and outbound? I mean, there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat. Certainly modern sales pros is rife with threads that talk about this and give a lot of really thoughtful advice on how to do this and how to motivate BDRs, SDRs to accomplish their monthly goals.
Yeah.
For the kind of inbound, outbound, I know that a lot of companies will have like the more junior role be the inbound reps who's taking some of these, easy, inbound, setting meetings, and then kind of mature into maybe an outbound rep. Some companies do hybrid. We've done it the opposite, where you start with the outbound, and then the inbound role is actually a promotion where we kind of changed the title, call them engagement specialist, where they actually have a higher base, lower variable, but then they the inbounds, but they also focus on these other kind of activities like white paper download, conference attendee lists, other follow-ups that kind of align more with marketing, and they actually sit in the marketing demand gen pod, our group, and so that's a way that we've kind of split out inbound and outbound here.
Yeah. That makes sense. So they're working almost like the warmer leads, the ones that are.
Exactly. But you saw early on, we let if someone downloads a white paper and then it just goes into kind of the queue for maybe an outbound person, they were less, anxious to go after them versus like that logo that they want to go after and that, enterprise logo. So this was a better for us to still focus on these like, requested white papers, stop by booth, some of these actions that maybe marketing would nurture, but this person's kind of personally nurturing them too.
I bookend this part of the conversation by just saying that the hardest part of closing any deal, it turns out when you look at a deal from beginning to end, the hardest part is finding it.
Agreed.
And I'm going to pause there and say it again. The hardest part of closing any deal, audience, is finding it. Your BDR, SDR, ADR, LDR, they are your opportunity finders. Don't try to, don't try to get over on them. Pay them for the back-breaking work that they do, right? Being the prospecting, phone calls, emails, Sendosoing people, right? It is the job that most quota-carrying sales reps can't stand. We've created this environment where we're taking typically younger in their career people and teaching them how to qualify, teaching them how to, relate to prospects and giving them a path to quota-carrying sales. But again, they need inspiration, they need development, they need onboarding, they need culture. Don't try to discount that role, because it's in B2B, in business to business, software as a service, SaaS, trying to get the acronyms spelled out. It turns out that you can grow and scale a company way faster than ever before. And there's countless companies here in the Valley that have proven that out with the SDR model.
Yep. That was all gold, and I second every word of that. You gotta, almost elevate that profession wherever you are in your organization, because it is a difficult one for sure. And
channel on Slack where we try to shout out the SDRs when these cool logo meetings are being set.
Nice.
Continue to highlight them and kind of share with the whole company that, hey, this SDR set a meeting with this logo, like, congrats. We can kind of rally behind it so they continue to build momentum and see that.
Totally. And when you announce your big logo wins, once the deal actually closes, make sure you're shouting them out as well.
They do that in the closed one notes too. It mentions the SDR who set that meeting, so they're also celebrated alongside the AE who closed it.
Nice. I love that. And we got a ton of great questions, so thank you, and do keep them coming. But I do want to move on from this kind of sales development hole that we went down a little bit and keep it moving. So we will try and get to all your questions at the end in the little Q&A. But Kris, I've got a question for you, and it's going back to this idea of, scaling a team. And I want to know, because you have some really unique insight, right? You moved from an AE to a CEO role. So you were like in the trenches, individual contributor, and now you're like, oh my goodness, now I'm scaling a team. You just said you had a new office, and it just, you scaled to like 20 BDRs. Share that experience with us. What were some of the challenges that you faced?
Yeah, so it's been an awesome learning experience, and so some of the my experiences, I've worked in sales for a decade before starting this company, so I really understood kind of the sales process, and really wanted to make sure that everything that I loved or didn't love was kind of learned and done here. So in that result, one of the things is just having a really good ratio of SDRs to AEs. That's an important thing that I've seen at the past companies where maybe execs are looking at spreadsheets versus and saying, hey, we need to hit this revenue goal, let's add these number of AEs, and maybe not necessarily then hiring the right ratios. That one step further, now being in the CEO role, where now I have to make sure that with that ratio, we have to make sure we're getting the CS, the customer success and the support to also be hired at the same time. At the same time, there needs to be finance, and there needs to be all these other roles that kind of hire all at the same time. So that's been a challenge.
Yeah.
I think there's always the comp plans. When you have two salespeople when we first got started, now we've got few dozen salespeople, a few dozen SDRs. How does that comp plan change? And how do you either grandfather them in, or how do you make them feel like they're still the early ones that got the first few million in the door? But that shift, and so a lot of these things, like I put myself in my shoes and being like, what would I have wanted? What's there? And I think sometimes early salespeople get kind of looked over because it's like, hey, we're going to hire 20 more. You're just another number. We've really taken it apart and see like, hey, each of you guys have added another million or so to our ARR. Like, how can we keep you forever?
Nice.
So.
That's awesome.
Add on to, if I look back at the 20 years and the 4 companies that I was with that scaled, they were all companies where the product, it worked. Necessarily know that it was the gold standard, but it was in the right space at the right time. And in the Valley, we've had 2 iterations of being at the right place at the right time, right? Late 90s and now, right now.
Yeah.
But the one thing that is standard for me is leadership team. And when you get to the point where you're going from 1 to million to 5 million, or 5 to 25, or 25 to 100 million, once you get to the point where you're at 50 to 100 million plus, and you're at hundreds of employees, now all of a sudden, right, communication and alignment and culture, diversity, and all the things that we were talking about right now become massively important. Let's say, communication and alignment just doesn't happen by itself. It happens when there are people that are at your company, that are running each of their different organizations, and they've done it before. They like each. They come together once a week, and usually the CEO, the leader, has created that. They've been able to find these people that have been there and done that, and are mature in the ways of scaling a company. And to get there is hard. And so senior leadership, being able to attract people that can provide that alignment and that communication, I think is, if I was an SDR today and I was going into a company, I would spend time looking at the backgrounds of the leaders that are at the company. Will they be able to scale not just the company, but themselves? Because it's scary. There's a lot of moving parts. It's hard. It's also a ton of fun, but it's hard.
Yeah, totally. I agree. It's the old, people first, then process, then technology. So it all hinges on, being able to attract those A players. So that's a great point. And that kind of naturally leads then to, how do we go out, and before we're 50 mil ARR plus, and we're looking for those like big hires that are going to, tackle culture and tackle all these different things. Maybe we're smaller and we're just looking to attract top AEs, top SDRs. How do we do that in such a noisy market?
One of the ways that I've done that is I've learned that if you can provide a development path, first of all, I think a lot of younger people in their careers are looking to put tools in their bag, if you will. And again, today, the modern sales operation kind of starts with technology, and layered process on that. And it turns out that if you have an unbelievable sales and marketing technology stack, and you have people that can create playbooks and guide earlier in their career people down, the path of what to say, when to say, how to say it, developing them as salespeople, and they want that. They also want really good frontline management. I think the unsung heroes in the Valley are the frontline managers in sales and marketing, right, on the revenue side of things. They're the ones who provide the inspiration. They're the ones that generate loyalty in the ranks. And I'll spend more time and energy looking for a frontline sales and marketing leader, because I know that the people that I'm bringing on want that. They want inspiration. They want to be developed, coached, and mentored. And that comes from frontline leadership.
Yeah, that's huge. I was told a long time ago to pick your manager, not the company, because that will, ultimately really help you succeed. And I've seen it firsthand, definitely ring true. And I agree. They don't get enough credit or enough training. There seems to be like very little training for sales managers or BD managers. Once you're graduated to that position, which is usually just the top rep still, it's kind of like you should know it by now. And nobody really teaches people the ropes, which is interesting. But Kris, would love to get your perspective on this as well.
Yeah, a great success with a couple of things. One is a lot of our early sales reps were referrals or friends of friends.
Nice.
Our VP of sales, someone he worked with at 2 companies ago. So I think being well networked and leveraging, creating a good sales culture so that the sales reps want to invite their friends in or their past colleagues have been really helpful. I'd probably say over half our sales team were from internal referrals. So that's been a helpful early driver. Also kind of profiling the specific, candidate at the time of company you are. If you're a couple of years, Series A, your process and environment might be different than an Oracle sales environment. And so you want to make sure that you're aligning well so that you don't go after an Oracle person who's used to having, an SE, 3 managers, this and that and this. And then they get dropped into your organization and it's a little bit, more loosey-goosey and like less process maybe when they're like, what do I do? I usually don't do demos myself, I have an SE. So really profiling and making sure that you, like when we are interviewing, being upfront with saying, hey, here's where we're at, here's the tools we have, here's some of the processes we have, so that we're not misaligned on what they're looking for. So I think, at the stage of your company, going after the right person can be key. And then, I think, finding the person that could thrive, if you're a very inbound driven type company, finding a rep that does good with that versus if you're a hybrid where the AEs are prospecting 50% of their time, you don't want to pick up an AE who's never prospected before. So some of those things will help drive success so you don't have someone that joins the team and then is kind of lopsided in their results because of expectations.
Yeah, being almost overly truthful into what they're stepping into, in my experience, has been helpful. And I also love the point you brought up there about not falling for big logos. Depending on the size of your company, if you're a scrappy startup, someone from these big, sexy logo companies might not be a good fit because, like you said, they're plugged into a process. The process works. They have lots of resources, and they may not be used to, creating everything from scratch and building the process themselves.
I also try to interview or phone screen almost everyone that comes through. It takes a lot of my time, but provides that kind of executive transparency and just kind of some of the almost like cheerleading of like, hey, this is really cool. This is how I started the company kind of vibes. Your first interaction maybe with a recruiter where you don't feel that kind of passion and connection right away. So we try to have our VPs and directors and even myself do a lot of early phone screens. Even though it takes our time up, it still provides us like some more excitement from candidates early on because they feel like they're being able to connect with leadership early on versus just 5 recruiters until they finally meet their VP.
Yeah. And Lars, what are some of your kind of hiring best practices? What do you watch out for? What are you looking for these days? I know you must have hired literally hundreds over your career, so there must be some common threads and themes that you've been able to kind of pull out.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd ask me that because I'm pretty outspoken and passionate about this topic. So I've probably hired, fired and promoted thousands over the career. But one of the things that I've always been able to do is I've been able to onboard, train, develop, mentor, and coach just about anyone that I bring on board, teach them how to sell, teach them how to qualify, teach them how to handle objections, teach them how to negotiate. You can teach a lot of the things in the sales world, but one of the things I've never been able to teach someone is getting out of the bed every morning and coming in and just getting after it. And people I know today call that grit. I call it fire in the belly. Learned that from one of my previous mentors at my first company. And that's what I look for. Before, I used to say the best predictor of future success is past success. Not necessarily the case with people coming out of school and, I'm trying to hire for, a sales development role. So what I'm looking for is background, is upbringing, is peer group, is, does this person have that fire in the belly? Are you willing to be the first one in, the last one to leave, right? I just call that working hard, working smart, and working long. And that's a really, really big thing for me. And I think it comes from upbringing, right? Mommy and daddy. And I think it comes from peer group back from when you were in high school and college. Were you following the right group or the wrong group? I don't want to get too much into what that means, but I found that the people who are just uber successful are self-starters, and they get themselves out of bed every morning, and they're right. They may go in and get 100 no's.
Yeah.
If they realize that they're maybe only one no away from getting a yes, and they're willing to come in the next day and do it all over again because they're motivated. They're in a place where they're having fun. They've got peers to the right and left of them. That's why I also advocate for, the inside role, not to be remote. Have a place for these people to congregate, to look at each other, watch each other, listen to each other. If I've had a particularly bad day as an SDR, man, maybe I want to spend 15 minutes on the phone with one of my peers who's crushing it that month to see what she wants. So I'm a big fan of not working remote for the ISR role.
What we've seen success with is during our kind of recruiting and processes, we'll do like peer-to-peer. So they'll have like a fellow AE or a fellow SDR that we've kind of trained on how to kind of interview people, and then they'll talk to them as well. So they get instead of always dealing with recruiters or VPs, they're able to say, hey, how is it like in the trenches, or like, what was your day like yesterday? And so we've selected some of our different teammates to kind of who've raised their hand that want to be part of the recruiting process. And I think that also is around that whole like being over transparent so that they know what they're getting into so that they're successful.
Yeah, I like that. Peer interviews are great.
We early on threw people in without giving them any kind of interview training. And it's like some SDRs or AEs never have recruited in the past, and you send them into a meeting and they might be just wasting 30 minutes of their time. So we have like some recruiting training, what questions to ask, what questions not to ask, and kind of like a process that we train our team through to be almost like mini recruiters in a sense.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like that. And I want to quickly go back and highlight Lars's point, just because I agree with it on so many levels, is that fire, that self-starter is what you're looking for. And, the line of past success equal future success, I definitely agree. And you can kind of tease that out, even if someone's fresh out of college, right? You can have success at just about anything. If you go all in and you crush it at, let's say you started some company in college, or you were really, really good at video games. Like maybe you're the best in your state at video games. It doesn't really matter what it was, but if you were able to, through perseverance, get to the top of whatever it is, sports, video games, math contests, whatever, if you got to number one, it takes that grit, that self-start. So I think that's a really good way to kind of tease that out of people in the interview process when maybe there's a lack of formal job experience.
Yeah, and it's easy to spot too, because these are the people that will come in, and yes, we all provide onboarding and training and development, and we provide playbooks, and we teach everyone what to do. But these are the people that are like, you know what? Just give me an email account, give me a phone, and let me have at it. I will make mistakes. We'll correct those mistakes. They'll get on the phone with just give me the 3 best reps and the 3 best SDRs, and let me just shadow them for 2 to 3 weeks. And they're not afraid, right? They're not the people that dive into phone booths or to quiet rooms where they don't want anyone to listen to them because they're maybe afraid. They don't care. They're like, you know what? If someone hears something that it's off, maybe they'll tell me. And so those are the people that I just love. And again, they're hard to find. And when you do, you just let them go. And the rest of the operation is there to bring, the early stage B to B plus players up to A minus players, right? Because as you go from 1 to 10 to 100, you have to create an environment where you're bringing, right? You can't have a team of 100 A plus players. It's impossible to find. You do have one, they're special, and use them to bring up everyone else around them.
We also define those A plus players. Traditionally it's like you bring them into the conference room and you grill them for an hour or something, or multiple hours. We found success too, or we actually encourage, there's a coffee shop a half a block and a bar another half a block. And it's like, hey, why don't you, go grab a drink or go grab coffee? and it kind of gets people out of their comfort zone, or also chatting about random stuff.
I know which way I'm going, Kris.
I'm with Lars for sure. You might not see me back for a couple hours, but I'll come and crush it.
And you know, you might bring out a conversation that they're like the top, you know, video gamer in the country based on that, you know, bar talk versus like you're grilling them over, you know, what did you hit quota last quarter with an interview question. So I think some of that, you know, figuring out their grit based on, you know, random conversations can also play a big part in finding those A+ players.
Totally. I remember my first 2 sales interviews, I had role plays on the spot with 0 prep, and it was crazy, but it was awesome, right? Like you can't expect it's more that like people jump in, right? You didn't have to crush it, but it was more like, okay, let's do this, instead of like, you know, shying away from the challenge, like you said, Lars. All right, I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little, we got another acronym here, a little bit about ABSD, account-based sales development, which is this big, call it a trend. It's kind of this transformation, but it's kind of also already been here the whole time. It's just got a new acronym a little bit. I think companies that were successful were already utilizing this. Now it just has a name and it's kind of formalized. But Lars, can you tell us a little bit about account-based sales development, how you see it?
Yeah, I mean, the account-based movement has been around for 40, 50 years. I remember getting trained as a young Xerox copier rep, solution selling, which was account-based marketing and sales together, right? Targeting the buyers and the personas within the account that you wanted to start a sales cycle with, and then being really deliberate about the messaging and the content and the personalization to try to move the ball forward. I think what's happened in the last 5 to 10 years here in the Valley is that access to understanding the target accounts you want to go after, but more specifically the people that you believe are going to be the decision makers or somehow involved in the procurement cycle, you can find them in a split second, whether it's discover.org or LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And now there's all kinds of services, right? It's allowed and given the power and control into the SDR's hands, right? It's this technology stack that we put together that allows them to find a person or a handful of people at the right account. And oh, by the way, now that we have these intent-based signaling technologies like Bombora and Demandbase, you can actually be delivered reports where people that you've never heard of at target accounts are discussing problems that your solution can solve and bring you for the first time, unsolicited conversations where this is a hot topic for them. Let's send them a message about what it is we're doing. We did that really successfully back at Cloudera, and that's where the idea for account-based sales development came in. We had all just read the Fishing with Spears blog post that John over at Engagio, and that's really, for me, what brought account-based marketing into the world. And when I read that post, I realized that my SDR team at Cloudera was doing all the same things that marketing teams were doing. And I wanted to include sales into the discussion because ABM was getting all of the press. So we decided to coin account-based sales development. And it was a very deliberate, right? Pick the account, pick the group of people that you believe you want to hear about your company's solution and customize to the company, customize to the vertical, customize to the use case, and customize to the individual persona. That's really, and again, I'm sitting here with the CEO of Sendoso, which happens to be now, it's become one of the kind of go-to touch points, right? We have emails, we have phone voicemails left. We have social touches through LinkedIn and Facebook, Twitter. We have drift-like chat bots that we can engage with, and we have direct mail. To orchestrate an outbound personalized approach, you have to try all the channels and do that A/B split testing. I think that's the big story of the Valley, is the technology that has allowed us to pinpoint a message to an account, to an individual that might care a lot. You sit back and you monitor opens and replies and click-throughs, and it's actually quite, there's an art there in all of the science that has been brought to bear on the demand gen pipeline generation process.
Yeah, it's almost as if this idea that's been around for a while, this account-based idea, it's like we're finally at the spot now where the technology has caught up, so we can now do all the motions that we're like, oh, it'd be so amazing if we could do all this. And now we can actually do it, and we can iterate, and we can test, and we can just keep getting better, which is definitely exciting time to be in sales management. Yeah, Kris. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I 100%. That's exactly what I was going to say. The one piece I would say also is the alignment too with marketing and demand gen now with the sales development team. So, marketing just blasting random accounts. Maybe they're helping the target accounts doing field marketing, inviting them to special events and other kind of more orchestrated outreach. Whereas before, maybe sales was going after their lists, marketing was going after everything. So I think the movement of the account-based sales development has also brought the teams closer, so you're going after the common target accounts using the technology, obviously.
Yeah. And Lars, you were going to say something there?
I was just going to say that sales engagement, which is this term now that is being used by all of us that have adopted technologies like Outreach and SalesLoft and Engagio and Persist IQ and YesSwear, and I mean, it puts the power of marketing automation, which is, in my opinion, being able to message your target accounts instead of at a broad, high, maybe a little bit watered down way, one-to-many. Now SDRs have the power of marketing automation in the form of sales engagement, where they can do one-to-one, which we call sniper campaigns, or one-to-many, which we call account-based sales development campaigns. And that level of automation, I mean, it's beautiful. It has created an order of magnitude scalability for an individual SDR. And imagine having 10, 20, 30 SDRs. You can literally target your entire target addressable market in a matter of months if you do it the right way. Outbound demand gen at scale is now possible through sales engagement. And it's just a beautiful thing.
It is, yeah. It's really about this, exactly like you said, it's personalization at scale. And in my eyes, the one of the coolest, like the automation is great, but one of the coolest kind of byproducts that has happened from it is actually allows your reps to be more human, because they have more time away from the mundane tasks. So when they do get a reply, they actually have time to do like a thoughtful response, and the motions where they're actually interacting are much more human, because they're not bogged down by, oh my God, I got to get out 100 emails today, or I'm going to, get fired this week kind of thing, So it's really interesting to see it all play out. And so Kris, it's very much in the same line that we're talking about right now, this account-based sales development. Is that really what inspired you to start Sendoso?
It did. I mean, like Lars was saying, I think account-based sales development has been around for forever, in terms of like most sales reps will have target accounts that they want to go after. For me, the pain point that I had when I was kind of a hybrid AE, I was still going after some having an SDR was bringing me meetings too, is that I wanted to kind of stand out, break through some of the noise of the maybe just digital emails that are going out. And so I was having a lot of success manually sending out handwritten notes, sending out these little gifts based on my personal research, and then I convinced marketing to start helping me do a bunch of that. but it was a very clunky spreadsheet process, and it wasn't tied into our CRM and our tech stack. So that's what really gave me the idea of like, hey, there should be this platform that helps orchestrate the offline delivery of direct mail, gifts, and some of these harder touch points to execute on, because you have to move something from point A to point B. You've got to source stuff. It's not as easy as sending an email. And that really inspired me. It's been awesome to be, someone that wanted to use that tool myself, seeing where we have come today, where we've got hundreds and hundreds of companies, tens of thousands of, super senders sending out stuff, and really benefiting from kind of an omni-channel outreach approach, but not having to, spend hours packing boxes or walking to FedEx and stuff.
Yeah. I love it. We actually did at Outreach, we did a straight up A/B test on direct mail, and the results were astounding. Like what we got, I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm going to butcher them, but if you want to check it out, there's a good test that we did that was amazing. It's a channel that's still just so underutilized. It's wild, right? Everyone gets 300 emails a day, but how many letters or packages do you get? Maybe like, one a week.
My quick story. So I got Sendoso'd several months ago. Someone had actually spent the time and read through a bunch of the different articles that I had written on my LinkedIn profile, and found out that there was a time where I was a Little League coach for my daughter's, Alameda Little League team.
Mm-hmm.
And I got sent, and it was a relevant, piece of sales 2.0 technology. And I got Sendoso'd a Louisville Slugger bat, full size. And the note was, I hope you can use this as batting practice for your daughter's baseball team. So they personalized it, and again, I still have it, and I'll never forget that feeling. And I don't even remember whether or not I got the technology, but I took the meeting because they had gone above and beyond in my mind.
Yeah.
If you do video really well, that's another way to really personalize. And I think those two things, direct mail and video, are now becoming differentiators in this sea of outreach and voicemails left and emails sent. And so I think you do have to vary your approach. And, the higher value target, the more channels you use. That's part of, the modern sales operation today. I think a lot of companies start out with just wanting logos, but at some point you have to realize that there's an ideal customer out there that is not only going to pay you the 20, 30,000 up front, but they're going to grow with you. They're going to renew and expand with you. To find that profile, so you understand what their propensity to buy, but more importantly, what their propensity to expand. I've taken a lot of hits in the past by not understanding propensity to buy and expand. A lot of companies think that, we got a new logo, but if they don't renew or if they don't expand after that first year, how much is it costing you to support, to train, to customer success, to educate? You can have bad customers that can kill momentum in your company.
Yeah, makes sense. How did you then identify, like obviously defining ICP is a whole other thing, and we'd be here all day, but how did you find these companies that you were willing to bet would grow with you? Were you looking at their growth trajectory? Like, how did you identify them?
So we identified kind of super users through our customer success organization. And again, Cloudera, right? It's a big data, free open source Hadoop, big data solution. It's very complicated, but when you drop something like that on a major Fortune 1000 or 2000 company, and the data scientists and the Hadoop engineers embrace it, and they start to deploy, implement, and bring workloads in, you can tell a customer is gaining value from your product. More importantly, they're actually teaching you. They're taking your product to levels that you never thought, and they're coming back saying, listen, can you have your product do this? And they're stretching you and your organization, and those are the customers that are innovating with your product that you can learn from. And those are, in my opinion, customers that end up becoming ideal customers and have a profile. And you just need to kind of tune to watch for them and make sure that the team supporting the post-sale is watching out for that.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Anyway, so I could pick both your brains all day long. We're up to the hour. I don't know where that hour went. But guys, that was awesome. Thank you so much for both of your insight. And there is a ton of questions here. So if people want to continue the conversation with either one of you, what's the best channel to get you on? LinkedIn?
Yeah, for me, add me on LinkedIn or send me an email. It's Kris with the K-R-I-S at Sendoso.com.
Cool.
Happy to send emails too.
I'm also Lars at SalesSource.com, but maybe what we can do is we can put together an FAQ with all the questions that got put in the queue. So Kris and I work to answer as many, if not all of those that we can, and maybe we do a blog post or something.
Let's do it. I am going to. So sometimes the chat ones disappear, so I'm quickly going to copy and paste them into another document. Great idea, though. Awesome. Well, again, thank you, gentlemen. And to everyone who joined us today, thank you for the great engagement. And go out and crush it this week.